they've got a very cool lore as essentially kind of a workers' rights spec ops in a sense. So units like the intruders that are infiltrating job sites where things have gone wrong, kind of as commandos to either kind of get everyone there out, shoot the place up.
All right, welcome back, everybody. My name is Jeff, and we're talking Infinity. So I got an expert to come in and talk Corregidor with me. Dante, how's it going?
Yeah, no, it's going great. Thanks for having me on, Jeff. Very excited.
Awesome. So you have your own Infinity YouTube channel. Do you want to give us a little taste? What do you got going on over there?
Yeah, so my YouTube channel is called Infinity the Dante. We do mostly Infinity content for sort of intermediate to advanced players, mostly focused on the meta and tournament scene. But it's a lot of fun over there. If you're looking for a deep dive on a faction, to get an idea of some basic list building tips, come over, have a look, have a poke around.
Yeah, there'll be some links down in the description so you can go check out that his channel, but especially the you recently actually did a Corregidor video. Again,
Mm,
kind of aimed at a little bit of higher level play. What we're going to be talking here is very much focused on new players, people that are just starting out and might have their eyes on Corregidor. So I figured you'd be the perfect person to have come in and kind of give us an expert opinion on some of this stuff and help people get started if they're jumping in.
yeah, no, I mean, look, Corregidor is a great faction. Both lore, models, the gameplay is really fun. And it's a very easy faction to collect as well. Sometimes you're playing a game, you like a faction, but there's some hard to find models or anything like that. But Corregidor doesn't have that problem, so it's very easy to plug and play with a lot of great models.
Yeah, they did a rework of Corregidor like what 4 years ago, give or take.
Mm,
Um,
yeah, yeah, and I got into the game when that rework came out with Corregidor. So yeah, no, they're great.
yeah. Um, so and also I have you here because you're going to be my study partner. I'm currently in a slow grow league and I just started with Corregidor. I was almost exclusively playing White Banner before this, and Corregidor is very
Oh, that's
different.
awesome.
So I'm partially you're here so I can pick your brain and I can figure out how to beat everybody in my league. But hopefully we'll bring some other folks along with us and we'll get other people started. So um,
Hell yeah.
on the note of the rework, so right now there's something called the Corregidor Action Pack. It's a common thing that Corvus Belli does. This was originally in like a two-player box with some other stuff, but if you want to just get into Corregidor, you can get the Corregidor Action Pack, and it's just a bunch of models that are all available for Corregidor. I think it's 10
Mm.
models, give or take. Um, do you just kind of high level view, do you think this is the must buy for somebody who wants to get into Corregidor? Should this be just their automatic first purchase?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're looking at the action pack line from Corvus Belli, you can always be pretty satisfied that if you want to get into a faction, grab the action pack. It usually comes with a lot of your more essential units, and it's a great way to just sort of start getting models on the table, especially if you're in some kind of league or you're going to a slow grow
Yeah.
or you're starting with a friend. It's a great escalation of models that gets you what you need to get started, hit the table, and have some.
Yeah, they definitely vary a little bit in terms of the types of things that you get, but you're almost always going to see a set of three line troopers with combi rifles. And for folks at home, that's like your most bog standard model that you're going to get. They can shoot stuff, and that's usually it. And they're not good at it, but one of the interesting things in Infinity is you want to have a bunch of guys in your army that are not that expensive, who probably aren't going to do
Mm.
much, but they help the other guys do more stuff. So for
Yeah,
Corregidor, we're working with Alguacil. Do you call them Aguaciles or Aguacils? I've heard both.
I think I've asked my dad, who grew up in Argentina.
Okay.
He says it's Alguaciles, but you can shoot. I don't. It's a war game. I think whatever you can manage to say
Yeah,
is what you can go with.
yeah. I have Hispanic heritage, but I am not fluent in Spanish, so I always say Aguacile because it sounds better to me. But
Yeah,
we'll go with that.
the there's one pronunciation that that just grinds my ears that I've heard once. I think it was Agulacils,
Nope,
and that
that's
hurt.
definitely not it.
That was that's the jalapenos of Aguacil pronunciation.
100%. That is exactly right. So aguaciles, again, we're talking real basic, not much to
Mm.
them. Is there anything notable about aguaciles compared to like a comparable line trooper in another faction, or are they pretty much just your cheap hires?
Well, look, I mean, of course they're your cheap hires, but in Infinity, you always need to bring a lieutenant in a list for it to be a valid list. There are a lot of mechanics tied to the lieutenant, but basically you don't want to get them killed. And if you want to get your cheapest lieutenant, that's the Aguacil.
Mhm.
Your next really viable lieutenant, I'd say, you're looking at around mid 30 points, and you've got a 300-point list. So over 10% on a pseudo deadweight piece. Where if you can take the Aguacil lieutenant, you're looking at a much cheaper buy-in. You can take an Aguacil lieutenant. You can take another plain one just to be the decoy to try and confuse your opponent on which one's which. And they're pretty dandy at that. And also, when you look at the Corregidor fire teams, and at Infinity, you can build these little squads called fire teams that give each other bonuses as long as they've got sort of matching friends with them. They're a great little starting pocket to build a fire team off of. If you just grab Lieutenant Aguacil, Decoy Aguacil, and a big gun, you're probably pretty happy about that. Otherwise, I'd really be drawing my eye towards the hacker profile. It's pretty decent. You're just sitting at a very cheap hacker. You're a willpower 13, which is generally considered the baseline of competency for most skills in Infinity. So they're a fine hacker. Otherwise, you're building fire teams around them, maybe taking the lieutenant profile. But as you said before, they're not incredibly standout. There are some really great line troops in Infinity, but the Aguaciles don't quite reach that that level of greatness.
But they are cheap, right? So a standard Aguacile, you're going to get three with combi rifles in the box, and it's a good time to point out that Infinity is a very proxy friendly game. So if you
Mm,
want to run them as not combi rifle Aguaciles, then you can give them, you pretend they have an HMG. Just tell your opponent. Um, but the combi rifle Aguaciles are 10 points. You get an order for 10 points. That's a pretty good, cheap body to have on the table.
yeah, absolutely. And on the subject of proxies, with having the two Aguaciles, if you're picking up the box, I'd paint two of them similar colors, then make one of them, slightly different color or scheme. You can either run that as the hacker to mark him as the odd one out, or you can use it to proxy the Dactari, who's the Aguacile doctor,
Mhm.
essentially. They essentially share a unit type with the Aguacil. They're very similar to each other, and it's just a 2-point upgrade from the Aguacil paramedic, but you get quite a lot more back for investing in the doctor over the paramedic. So it's a very easy and very useful proxy with that third Aguacil, just painted a little bit different, and it can have a lot more applicability on the table.
Yeah, that's a really good call out. I know for some people they'll do like a unique base feature or something like that, just so that you can
Mm,
easily distinguish the one that's not the same as the rest of them. But that's a great call if you want to just do a slight tweak to their armor, give them a stripe or something to
yeah,
distinguish.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that's what I just did. I just painted one of their shoulder pads a different color than the other guys, and
yeah.
that's sort of enough to help your opponent out. To say, "Yep, hey, this is a doctor. It's a different unit." But no, it's the three Aguacils. They're useful to have in the box. There are some factions where you get the three line troops and you sort of groan. But Corregidor is not a faction like that. You're pretty happy to be getting these models in the box.
Mhm. Yeah, and the less points you spend on your not so useful guys, the more points you have to spend on the fancy toys that you want to buy later.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
So after that, everything else that comes in the action pack is going to be its own unique thing. So there's a bunch of other stuff, and it's all going to
Mm,
have lots of variety. I'm just going to go down the list as they have it on Corvus Belli's website. So the next thing up is the Sombra Hacker with multi rifle. Any
yeah.
is this something that you would typically take in a full on list? And what should people look out for if they're kind of getting started? What are the highlights for a Sombra?
So the Sombra, I'll start off by saying it's a great unit. but it's a sometimes food when you're looking at the wider faction. But as a tool to be using in your early games, it's a really good one. So what it is it's got some special deployment rules where it can start 8 inches up the table, which is almost to the midline, which is really nice. And you're also starting in a camouflage state. So you don't put down the model, you put down a marker, and if your opponent wants to interact with you, they have to find you first,
Yeah.
essentially. And there's some fun mechanics around that. Uh, but you're up in that midfield, which is great. You're in a protected state, which is really nice. So it's unlikely your opponent will have to put a lot of resources into getting rid of you on the first turn. And really, what these guys are, um, they're a very resilient Swiss Army knife. So if you look at their sort of shooting abilities, they've got ballistic skill 12, which is a little bit below average, but they make up for it with a skill called mimetism, mimetism -3, which essentially says unless your opponent has special tech, your opponent's going to be at a -3 to be shooting at you. So even if your opponent's at that good, ballistic skill 13, a lot of the time you'll be getting them with your mimetism. And then if you're coming out of your camo state, you get a bonus for surprising them as well for that first order. So that's really nice. In terms of weapons, they've got essentially enhanced rifles. They've got shotguns and they've got boarding pistols, which are templates that are kind of like flamethrowers in other games. You can sort of wash over a few units. So they're really good in that way. So they're great shooters, but they're also quite good at pressing buttons. Infinity, it's a very objective based game. There are missions where you're looking to kill each other, but sort of like Malifaux, which your audience might be pretty familiar with, it's really all about getting those points on your objectives.
Yep.
You can run around and cut people's head off with Lady J all you want. That's not necessarily going to win you a game. Same with Infinity.
It's why I think there's a lot of crossover between the two games. Is that they're both very
Mm,
objective focused. They're both very complicated, deep games. So a lot of
yeah,
times, if one
absolutely.
appeals to you, the other will as well.
Yeah. So you're a good shooter. You're a good button presser. And you're decently resilient for what you are as well. You've got no wound incapacitation, which essentially says when you should be dead, you keep dragging yourself around, essentially. And there are ways to kind of heal yourself back up. But they're also very good hackers as well. Now there are two kind of hackers in Infinity. You've got hackers who are able to take control of enemy mechs. They're able to lock the suits of heavy infantry. They're able to do a lot of really cool and interesting stuff. Then you've got killer hackers who are purely there just to kill hackers.
Yeah, they're the
Now
anti-hacker
Corregidor,
hackers.
yeah, yeah, the hackers.
Yeah.
Yeah, you either hack hackable things or you hack hackers. But you've got a really good spray of hackers in Corregidor. You don't have as many killer hackers, so the Sombra is actually a very good killer. And when you're hacking enemy hackers as well, there's a chance, if you're coming out of your camouflage state, you get a surprise attack on top of that. Uh, so a lot of the times you're going to be 3 dice on 16 to try and fry your opponent. And if you line things up right, you can be putting them at a -6 to resist you, which is really, really strong.
Yeah, very cool stuff. They have a kind of intimidating, especially if you're a new player, they have a kind of an intimidating stat line. There's so many special abilities there, but I think you summed it up really well there. They're relatively expensive. It looks like
Mm.
they're 36 to 40 points. You said they're a sometimes take. Are you thinking you're primarily taking them as the killer hacker role to try to counter your opponent's hackers, or do you get some play out of the other profiles as well?
I really am drawn to that killer hacker. I
Yeah.
think it solves a lot of problems for the faction, and you get a lot of mileage from it on the board as well. But the if you can't quite afford the killer hacker, just the regular specialist operative, the cheaper profile, is quite good as well. And really, I'd be looking to take this in missions where you need something durable up the field. Where you've Cricketer has a lot of durability in the deployment zone, but if you just need something chunky that can go invade a zone of interest, or can grab a box where someone's put a mine next to it and be able to tank that armor save, that's where the Sombra really shines. Or with climbing plus, means they can essentially walk on walls if you've come across a table where, you know, the objectives on, like, a 5-inch tall building. The Sombra might really be one of your only tools to be able to access that without significant hassle.
Yeah.
So some thoughts on the terrain as well can push you to want to take a Sombra. But as you said, it is a more expensive piece, so it's a sometimes food. If there are 20 points, I'd put them in every list, but they're just a sometimes food based on cost.
Isn't that always the case? If you cut their points in
Yeah,
half,
yeah.
it'd be much better.
Mm,
Cool. So I think that's the Sombras. Let's move on to the Evaders, EVA Tactical Group. So the one that comes in the
mm,
box is modeled with an AP Spitfire, which is one of my favorite weapons in the game. But
yeah.
obviously, again, feel free to proxy. They have lots of different options here. What are your thoughts on the Evaders?
Yeah, the Evaders are a very interesting and very deep unit, where each one of their profiles fills a different role. But at a baseline, the Evader's a heavy infantry, so it's got sort of a wound and a half, kind of like the Sombra. It can keep dragging itself around even when it's meant to be dead. It's got some good armor. It's got some good shooting. And each one of them is a specialist operative, so they're very good units at completing missions. Then when you sort of go into the profile, a lot of them are engineers, which is really nice. It means you can essentially fix your robots or fix up your heavy infantry, which is really funny on the Evader as a heavy infantry who can fix himself. If someone locks your armor or shuts off your comms, the engineer can sort of, well, if he's outside of hacking range, he can waddle away and fix himself, which is really interesting and something a lot of other heavy infantry can't do. But then really you break up into either aggressive gun profiles or support profiles. So these support profiles, you've either got engineers with shotguns or rifles, or essentially engineers who give you anti-hacking tech, with sort of a kind of put a firewall over themselves and the rest of the team. So you'll be using this guy if you're taking one of the big battle bots as the main gun in the link, or even if you can just slam two different evaders and that Aguacil doctor we talked about before together, and that'll be really nice. The other profiles then are the gun profile. So you mentioned the AP Spitfire, which is really nice. You're shooting 4 dice at someone, which is on the higher end of how many dice you can throw at someone in Infinity.
My channel's called DefectiveDice for a reason. The more dice I can roll, the better, because I wanna even out that spread.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Spitfire, it's really sort of the premier assault weapon in Infinity. You've got kind of your longer support weapons to, get a bit up the field, but once you're up the field, the Spitfire is sort of where the magic's at. And then you've got a Feuerbach as well, which you could describe as kind of like an explosive railgun, is how I describe that. And it's a great tool to take as one of those support weapons. It's a good offensive and defensive weapon as well. But there's one profile I really like for the Evader, where you get the AP Spitfire, so you get that really good forward assault gun. He's an engineer, so he can pick up bots and sort of do that as well. And he gets that anti-hacking firewall. So he really, one thing that's important in Infinity is you've got, you want to hit your 15 orders in most lists if you're playing a full game. And essentially you've got a limit on how many troops you can take. So there's a concept called slot compression, which is, how many roles can you fit into one unit in a list?
Yeah.
And the Evader AP Spitfire Engineer is a really great slot compression
Yeah, because he's kind of a jack of all trades. He's got a bunch of different boxes that
tool.
he checks. So if you need any of that tech, you got, 3 in 1 instead of having to split it across several different models.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, he's ballistic skill 13, which, as I said, is sort of the baseline competency. He doesn't really have any modifiers other than that. But if you put him in a team, he's throwing 5 dice at someone. And when you're hitting just that volume of dice, even if he doesn't have other modifiers like the Sombra with the mimetism, you're still usually getting something through.
Very cool. If you're enjoying this video and you want to support the channel, then there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. The first would be to pick up some merchandise through my merch store. You can grab a t-shirt, a hoodie, a mug, a sticker, all sorts of cool stuff like that. You can also shop using my affiliate links. So if you're going to make any purchases from any of these companies, you can use the links in the description below to make your purchases, and it will go directly to supporting the channel at no extra cost to you. There's also a link for my Ko-fi if you would just like to give me a tip, or my Patreon if you want to support me longer term. I have a bunch of different tiers there, and there are all sorts of benefits available to people, such as early access to videos, ad-free videos, the opportunity to vote in polls about upcoming content, and extra entries into the giveaways that I run occasionally. But if none of that is your cup of tea, no problem at all. Just make sure that you're subscribed to the channel and leave a like on the video. It actually helps a tremendous amount. And if you want to go the extra mile, then consider sharing the video out with some friends who you think might find it interesting. The YouTube algorithm is not kind to small YouTubers, so that helps a whole bunch. Other than that, consider joining the Discord, also linked in the description, where you can come and hang out with me and the rest of the community and talk games. But with that, let's get right back to the video. The next one on the list is the Hellcat with boarding shotgun. Boarding shotgun, another favorite of mine. They've changed a little bit recently, but still a powerful tool. What are your thoughts on Hellcats?
So the Hellcat, I think, really exemplifies one of the reasons you want to play Corregidor, which is that Corregidor really plays the game around different vectors of approach to your opponent. Now, Infinity, it can be a pretty it's a tough game starting out,
Yeah.
just because it's got a very high lethality. So really, you can make one mistake that opens up your defensive nets, and then they've got a ninja in your deployment zone, karate chopping all of your units, and that's sort of maybe you've just deployed because it's a game where you can lose in deployment.
Oh yeah, I've lost in deployment many times.
Yeah, it's a rite of passage for any new
Yeah.
Infinity player. So there are sometimes you're playing a game, especially when you're starting out, where maybe your opponent goes first. You messed up your deployment a little bit, and suddenly it's like, oh, okay, well, all of my big guns are gone. I don't have any vision blocking stuff. I can't leave my deployment zone. And for a lot of factions, it's like, okay, you give them the handshake, maybe you re-rack, talk about how you could have set up better.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons to play Corregidor is that it's genuinely very hard to entirely block you out of the game. Corregidor's got a lot of ways to get into your opponents and essentially try and recover, or just come at them from ways they don't expect. And the Hellcat's part of that. So what the Hellcat has, it's got combat jump, which means essentially you can just place them anywhere on the table and then make a roll to see if they land. So you've got a lot of versatility just in there. And they're Infinity's most reliable combat jump unit. A lot of Infinity players are very risk averse and stay away from drop troops. But you're rolling a d20 in Infinity. Most drop troops are landing on an 11 or a 12, which is a bit more of a coin flip than you'd like without any outside help. But the Hellcat on its own, it's needing a 15 or less, which is a 75% chance. And again, you can get outside support to make that even higher.
Yeah.
But they're incredibly reliable at getting where you need them to go. So there are a few different profiles. There's one that really sticks out to me, which is the 23 points paramedic with combi rifle and deployable repeater. And what's really important in Corregidor is they're a hacking faction.
Yeah.
So they really want to spread out their hacking net. And you've got a few ways of doing that in Infinity. You can shoot out these things called pitchers, which are sort of like remote antennas. Some units kind of carry network extenders on them. But having the deployable repeater, you just you take an action to put it down, and it puts out a hacking zone within 8 inches where your hackers back in your deployment zone can hack anyone within 8 of that. So if your opponent has something scary like a mech in the deployment zone or a big team of heavy infantry, the Hellcat can land, you know, around the corner from them, drop that deployable repeater, and then you can just start hacking them straight away.
Yeah.
And look, ballistic skill 12, we talked a bit earlier, that's a bit lower than you'd like without modifiers. But a lot of times you're shooting people in the back, you're getting them out of cover, just because you're in a place people don't expect you to be. So you've got that as sort of your network extension tool. And again, it's still got a good gun. It's still a paramedic, so it can do objectives. Other than that, the Hellcat hacker's quite nice. A lot of the times, if you come up against, very scary factions or a very good opponent who knows Corregidor and knows what you're doing, they can take the time during a game to just kill all of your hackers that they can see. So having one that's off the table that you can bring in at an opportune time is really nice. and then sort of the scheme equivalent in Infinity, they're called classified objectives. They're very different from the main objectives in Infinity, and the Hellcats hacker can do most of the deck. Essentially, to do a classified, you need to have a troop with a certain number of skills or classifications,
Right.
and the Hellcat ticks a lot of those boxes. I think, yeah, it can do like 20 out of 24
Yeah.
cards in the deck. So
Plus,
it's
it can come in off board and be wherever it needs to be, which is key.
yeah.
Yeah.
And there are some missions in Infinity entirely based around those classified objectives.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a really great one too. So yeah, I'm really drawn to the paramedic combi rifle and the boarding shotgun.
Yeah, and the other cool thing about boarding shotguns is his ballistic skill may not be spectacular, but if you're in good range with a boarding
Mm,
shotgun, you get twice the bonus that most weapons get at their best. So that can
yeah,
change it a lot when you run around with a shotgun.
yeah, it's a brutal gun as well. It's got armor piercing rounds, which are really valuable. So that there's nothing that wants to be shot by that gun outside of cover, which the Hellcat will probably have.
Yeah. Yep. Very cool. The next one we have here is the intruder with the HMG. I've had
Mm.
a miserable experience with my intruders, but it is almost certainly entirely my fault. So tell me what I did wrong.
I mean, look, the intruder. It's really one of the heroes of the faction. And another, it's one of the reasons to play Corregidor, but they're definitely a finesse
Yeah.
piece. And a lot of people, again, it's a very lethal game. You make a mistake, the unit dies. The intruder's quite expensive. It's almost 40 points, which is pretty expensive for an Infinity unit, who's not like a mech or like a mega heavy infantry or something. Uh, but what they do, they're very good at. So just like the Sombra, they start in a camouflage state, so that gives them a bit of protection, and also means you get a surprise bonus when you pop out. They've got that mimetism that the Sombra has too. They've got a really good ballistic skill at 13, but the really special thing is they've got a multispectral visor level 2. You don't really need to know what that means exactly, but what it does is it means it ignores enemy mimetism and lets you shoot through smoke. Now, a lot of units in Infinity have smoke grenades, and this is a very common tool to block line of sight. A unit can throw out a smoke grenade, you put a template down, and units can't draw line of sight through that template. But with the intruder having the level 2 visor, it can see through smoke. And if it's shooting at a unit through that smoke, if they want to shoot back, they start at a -6 to do so. So let's say you had your evader Feuerbach on defense. So you'd be shooting with your intruder HMG. If they decide to shoot back, they start on a 13. Let's say they're in good range, they get a +3. They go up to a 16. They're -6 for smoke, so now they're on a 9. They're -3 for your cover. Now they're on the 6. Then they're -3 again for your mimetism. They're -12. They're not going to hit you. So the intruder, it's yeah, it's a great scalpel piece.
Yeah. Yeah, it ends up being a situation where if they're gonna try shooting you, they're just hoping they get a crit because that's the only way they're gonna beat
Mm,
you.
yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so these guys are fantastic. Both they've got two weapons: the heavy machine gun, which is a really good, DZ to DZ shooting weapon, and the sniper rifle, which is pretty similar. Both of them are good. If you're a newer player, I'd really start with the heavy machine gun.
More dice.
I've got a whole video on my channel about this. Which one should you take? But the sniper rifle is much more of a finesse piece. You can start to take once you get a greater understanding of the game. But yeah, the intruder HMG, unless you get crit, it's a very reliable gun, but it is fragile and it does need a bit of setup. So it's a piece you can grapple with trying to get the setup on and the shooting on right. But once you get it under your belt, you're never going to want to leave home with that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a finesse piece, I think that's a great way to put it. If your opponent knows how to deal with it or you don't know how to use it, it's good. It's very easy to just lose it, but a lot of really good
Mm,
tech. As is common in Corregidor, as we've already seen so far, also there's a hacker profile, a killer hacker, in fact. Any use you get out of that, I mean, it's whip 14, which is the important stat for a
yeah.
hacker, and that's good. That's a good willpower.
Yeah, no, it's a very good willpower. I have put it on the table and haven't really been impressed by it. Essentially, it directly competes with the Sombra
Yeah.
killer hacker, and you have a lot of tech on the intruder that the weapons the hacker is armed with doesn't really get to make use of.
Yeah.
And when it is a good willpower. It's a very good willpower. You're getting that surprise attack, but I think the Sombra just suits the role of a forward deploying killer hacker better. And also that resilience the Sombra has with the no wound incapacitation is a really nice safety.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a little riskier, and you're paying for that MSV2 and not using it, which is a
Mm,
shame.
mm.
Next up, we have the Tomcat Engineer with multi-rifle.
So the Tomcat is sort of the Hellcat's little brother, is how I describe it. So the Hellcat, you can essentially put it anywhere on the board and make a roll. But both the Tomcat and the Hellcat have a different skill called Parachutist, which just says you can essentially place them on any board edge, not in your opponent's deployment zone. So you lose a little bit of the flexibility with the combat drum going anywhere you want. But it's a lot more reliable because you don't have to roll for it, and you can just sort of toot along
Yeah.
there where you are. So there are a few different genres of profiles with the Tomcat. Uh, the first two that aren't specialists are really just there to massacre people, and they're really quite dangerous. They've all got combi rifles and light flamethrowers. And flamethrowers, if you get in your opponent's grill, if they've put a little team of guys, you can drop that flamethrower on them and just burn them to death. Even if they've got multiple wounds, if you fail a save against a flamethrower, you keep taking saves until you pass one. So they can be a really, really horrific and deadly weapon.
You got to stop, drop, and roll, or else you just keep
Yeah,
burning.
yeah, absolutely. So both of those profiles, they're quite good if you can't quite afford the Hellcat. And then you've got the doctor and engineer profiles. There are ones where they're just sort of running around, and they're good. To do those classifieds, they're still pretty deadly with the weapons they have. But the more interesting ones potentially are the ones that come with the Zondcats. So these are little buddies that get deployed with the Tomcat, and there's no limit on operating distance. You can put them on totally different edges of the board as well, and they can essentially doctor or engineer through those units. So if something's gone down in your deployment zone that you want to get back up, but you don't want to, just land your Tomcat in your deployment zone because that's lame. You can have the Tomcat up doing an objective. You can put the zoned cat back in your DZ, run up and get something. Or, if you see a unit you want to assassinate, uh, and there's also something else you want to do, you get a lot of free incidental movement with how the peripheral rules work in Infinity. So they're pretty interesting in that respect. But at that point, you are getting to the points cost where you could take a Hellcat. So it becomes a bit more of a how much do I value that? But I think they're still great units. Wouldn't fault anyone for taking them. But there's a lot of interesting things to be done. Tomcat.
Yeah, and the most important thing is the Zoncats are cute. So if you
Mm,
want to play little cute cat robots, that's for you.
yeah, they're adorable. And I'll also maybe draw the viewer's attention as well too that there's a character Tomcat as well.
Mhm.
So Infinity kind of has this concept where you've got kind of a unit, and then sometimes you have character versions of those units who are, like a sergeant or a lieutenant of the regiment, something like that. So the Tomcats have Carlotta Kowalski, Tomcat Sergeant, and she's really, really cool because she has a special rule that says she can walk on the board from your opponent's deployment zone edges, which is really, really powerful. If your opponent doesn't know that that's something you can do, or they've sort of, unpacked a bit of their force and there are more gaps in their deployment zone, she can run through that and just collapse the deployment zone. Her
Surprise.
cat is also really cute as well.
Yep.
Uh, but it's got a bomb on it, which is different to the other cats. It has explode, so there's a lot of really mean, nasty, disgusting things you can do with that. And she's still a specialist, and she shoots better. Da 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 da.
Yeah.
But she is a decent. She's considerably more expensive. But if you're looking at what fun off the table cat do I want to take, make sure you take a look at Carlotta as well.
Very cool. The next one is the Wildcat NCO with Spitfire.
Mm. So the Wildcats, and you might be noticing a theme at this point.
All
They've got
cats.
lots of cats. Yeah, yeah. They're sort of your they're sort of your next level up of troops from your Aguasils. A lot of factions kind of have, their line troop, their kind of standard medium infantry, and then their standard heavy infantry. So the Wildcats are your standard medium infantry for the faction. So they do a lot of different. They've all got a level one visor, so they can sort of see through smoke, but not incredibly well. But they ignore mimetism, which is really nice. Mimetism is a very popular skill we discussed with the Sombra. And you've got that NCO Spitfire option. So NCO essentially means they get a free extra order to themselves. They can use it to activate a link team. Lots of fun going on there. So the Wildcat Spitfire, it's pretty okay. I think it does compete, with the Evader we just talked about. It's going to compete with a unit we're going to talk about in a little bit, the Vostok. But it's fine in its role. I think too many cats. The Wildcat uh, really shines with its heavy rocket launcher. It's a very, very cheap profile.
Yeah.
That's just a good little unit to take. If you're not taking an intruder. So if you're taking an intruder, you don't necessarily have the need for the visor. So you can lean more into the support profiles, which are really good support profiles. So the Wildcat also has a very special skill called Combat Instinct, which means essentially there are a lot of units in the game with stealth. So if there's a sneaky ninja or a particularly quiet heavy infantry, they can run past your hackers without you getting the chance to hack them, unless you can see them. And if you can see each other, your hacker's probably in trouble.
Hmm.
So the Wildcat being able to stop them before they can get that approach is really, really nice. So I'm looking towards the hacker, who's quite good, and also the killer hacker, who's quite good. We mentioned before there's a bit of a gap in killer hackers in the faction, and if you're not taking the Sombra, who's a sometimes food, really you're more looking towards the Wildcat. And the Wildcats are great. They've still got that combat instinct, but they've also got a really heavy hacking defense. So in Infinity, you've got your armor, and they've got your BTS, which is biotechnical shield,
Hmm.
is I think the long name
I
for
call
it.
it your
But
magic armor,
essentially,
but it's yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. It's your threatening demeanor. It's
Yeah.
your terrifying. Uh, but so yeah, when you're making armor saves with Wildcats against your magic armor, they're really really tough.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon for them to have a +9 if they're supported properly. And the way Infinity saves work, you have a number you need to roll under. The common one for trying to kill a killer hacker, the common number for that is a 6.
Mhm.
So it means if the Wildcat's set up properly, they're not going to take a wound unless you roll a 16 or more, which is really really tough. So a lot of the times your opponent's going to have to try to do something else, and that's going to be really annoying. But yeah, both Wildcat hackers are really nice. I should give a brief shout too. You do have a Wildcat Lieutenant
Yeah.
option, but it's not one I would take if you can avoid it. Now to be clear, sometimes you can't. Just the list you've built, sometimes you can't avoid it, and that's fine. But I'd really be looking to downgrade to the Aguasil or upgrade to the Mobile Brigada, who's sort of a unit, off in your future as a Corregidor player. But I'm a big fan of both the hackers. The engineer, it's fine as well. I'd rather take the Mobile Brigada. Sorry, I'd rather take the Evader. But the Wildcat has better. It can go with more things. So again, sometimes you have to take that by necessity, and that's
Yeah. So just to kind of touch on that again, as far as the lieutenants go, because I think as a new player, that's
mm,
probably something that people need to learn relatively early on.
mm.
You say you're better off with the Alguacil. Is that strictly just because it serves the same purpose but is cheaper?
Yeah, because when we talk about the Aguacile, we always talk about you're taking the Aguacile, and then you're taking that decoy as
Yeah.
well. Now, the Wildcat Lieutenant, uh, it essentially it costs a little bit more than if you took two Aguaciles, but if you want to take two Wildcats, it's costing you a lot of points to
Yeah.
do so. And if your opponent knows the game quite well, they're going to see a plain wildcat with no support skills, and they're going to go, that's really strange. That's probably your lieutenant.
Right.
And if you're not taking that decoy, you're putting yourself at a lot of risk. If your opponent has, a guided missile to drop on them, or an assassin that can go in your deployment zone, uh, it's pretty easy to lose a turn if you take the wildcat lieutenant without a decoy, and at that point, it's quite an expensive proposition.
Yeah. Very cool. So, last but certainly not least, as far as the action pack goes, you might notice the odd man out if you look at the art for the action pack. We have the Volstock Mark 12, and this is our little robot friend. This is an
Oh,
unusual as far as remotes go because this is a very expensive remote, right?
he is, but you get a lot of bang for your buck.
Mm-hmm.
So we sort of discussed before how those other units had mimetism -3, starting you off at a -3 to shoot them. The Vostok has mimetism -6,
Mm-hmm.
which is a really heavy mod to be putting on people. It's got a pretty good weapon as well in the Mach 12. It's another medium range gun. And when I said, the Wildcat Spitfire has a bit of competition with the Evader, it's also got competition with this as just a really nice shooting platform. Uh, Another really nice thing about it, it's got 2 wounds. It's got 3 armor as well. So it's quite hefty. And we've already seen in the faction, you've got quite a lot of engineers in the faction as well. So if it is to go down, uh, you've got a lot of ways to get it back up. So a really nice thing you can do is take like the Vostok. You can take an Evader boarding shotgun to just sort of follow it around and pick it up if it needs it. That's really groovy. But there are also some special rules about. There's different ways you can support robots essentially. And one of the things you can do is if you take another unit that's kind of like a backfield support unit, you can give it marksmanship, which means it ignores cover. So it suddenly means that a lot of your gunfights, you're starting shooting on 15s because you're ignoring their cover, and they're shooting you at -6. So you've usually got a 9 point swing on them on a d20,
Yeah, that's big.
which is pretty massive. It's like a 45% swing
Yeah.
in your favor. So they've also got climbing plus as well, like the Evader, so they can scale up buildings. They can get in places that your opponent really wouldn't expect. And one of my favorite things to do with these guys is to put them on suppressive fire, which is a really good defensive, essentially a defensive state where you shoot 3 dice in reaction on your opponent's turn instead of one, and you get to put them at another -3. So if you've got a hard point you need to defend, you can whack the Vostok on there in suppressive fire, and most of the time, if you're behind a cover as well, with -3 for cover, -6 for mim, -3 for suppression, you're starting someone off at -12, which is really brutal if they don't have the right equipment to get around that.
They're probably just going to avoid that section of the table.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah,
That's
that's what you
awesome for
want.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, another thing that I like, and I didn't really fully appreciate how useful this was until it came up, and it was clutch in a game that I played. But remote presence is really interesting
Mm,
because what that allows you to do is basically when any model in the game goes down to 0 health, with the exception of the ones we called out before that have no wound incapacitation, they go down. They basically fall unconscious.
mm,
Um, Anything with remote presence has basically 2 levels of unconscious. So they can go down to 0 and they fall unconscious, and then they can go down to -1. But if you
mm.
heal them, they go back up to 1. So it's kind of like a little emergency mode where if you try to heal your robot and you accidentally break him worse, you get another try. And if you pass it on the second
Mm.
try, he goes back up to 1 health. So if you have all those engineers, that allows you to, even if your opponent gets lucky and takes this guy out, there's a pretty good chance you're going to get him back in the fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And with a lot of defensive units, if you're putting just, let's say you put the Wildcat heavy rocket launcher, up as a defensive piece, there's a decent chance that just gets blown off the board. But with the Vostok, if you've got that in a defensive position, your opponent's going to have to do 4 wounds to it in one order to completely blow it away, which it's just incredibly unlikely. So it gives you a bit more, uh, yeah, a bit more of a safety net when it's a defensive piece as well.
Right.
Uh,
And for 40 points, you want it, you know?
mm, yeah, absolutely. It's also got a repeater if you take the one that can't go in teams. And you've got some nice synergy with that where you can put white noise from the Vostok to shoot at something, which can white noise. It just means if your opponent has a visor, they get worse at shooting you. So the Vostok really doesn't have that many bad matchups either. It can usually have a way to solve any problem your opponent puts.
Yeah. Very cool. So that rounds out the action pack. So, we have
Mm,
quite a bit of variety there, from good gunfighters to hackers, engineers, deployment shenanigans, tanky robots, all kinds of cool stuff. And I think you said earlier, this is the clear first buy for anybody who wants to play
mm.
Corregidor. So would you suggest that folks pick this up and then get a few games in at lower points values before they go from there? Or I know some people say Infinity is not balanced under 300 points. You should always play at 300 points, even if you're brand new. Where do you fall on that? What do you think?
I think playing at 300 points straight out the gate is ridiculous. I think it's a crazy idea. I mean, yeah, it's no, it's not going to happen. Really, I'd look at even your first game. I'd look at just playing on like a 2 by 2 or like 1 by 2 board or mat, just taking your line troops against your friends' 3 line troops
Yeah.
just to get a base idea of the mechanics, and then slowly graduate to 100 points, 150 points. And then I think once you've got the game down at 150 points, I think that's when you can jump straight to 300. But the essentially the workup from 0 to 150 points, I'd be slow rolling that.
Hmm.
But then once you hit 150 and you're comfortable with that, the jump to 300 really isn't too bad. But a lot of Infinity is about understanding your unit's special skills, understanding your opponent's special skills, and how they all interact. There's a common language to the game, which is really nice. But yeah, I'd really be starting at lower points cost with this action.
Yeah. Okay, very cool. So for anybody who has already gotten to that point, or is just very sure they're going to be super into their Corregidor and wants to look
Mm.
into expanding from there, what are some of the standouts in the faction that you think are must-haves for somebody who wants to take it a little more seriously?
Mm. So I think with Corregidor, there are two must buys that are non-negotiable if you
Okay.
want to play Corregidor. The first one is Jazz and Billy. So this is it's a beautiful nomad story, a girl and her robot.
Uh huh.
Um,
My favorite
and she
character.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And she is so Jazz is a character hacker who is both a regular hacker and killer hacker rolled into one. And she's usually uh in terms of hacking, she's sort of the monster
Yeah.
in the list. So you're a hacking faction, you're leaning into hacking. So why not take one of the best hackers in the game? And she's really one of the best hackers, partially on price point. So when you buy Jazz, you've got an option to bring along Billy as well. And together they're 21 points for 2 orders. And Billy, I mean, he doesn't look like he does much on the surface, but he's really useful. I can't tell you how many people have underestimated running by Billy and just been shot in the back of the head with his pistol. But he's got mines he can deploy. He's a repeater as well, so he extends your hacking area. He's got a flash pulse. He's got quite a lot of little tech things going on.
I actually didn't realize he had a heavy pistol. That's very funny.
Yeah, no, I mean, and most people don't care and don't
Yeah.
care to ask. Like I've had I've had a bear run by me, just get shot by, just get shot by Billy,
Don't underestimate
uh,
the robot.
take a wound, and it's like, oh no, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
That's a trade up.
But yeah, oh, it's a hell of a trade up. But when you're looking at taking these 2 units, they're essentially costing you 10 points each, if you divide the cost, and 10 points for what Jazz brings to the table is insane.
Mhm.
It's absolutely insane. Now there are times you will take just Jazz on her own if you're running out of slots in your army, or if you want to put her under a firewall for hacking defense. That's absolutely a cool and viable thing to do. But right off the bat, the first unit I'd be picking up is Jazz and Billy. Have you picked them up yet?
Oh yeah. I started collecting this when I picked up well, I got really heavily into Infinity when I got Defiance, so I had
Mm.
the special versions of her, but I have like at least two
Oh,
other
that's
versions of her since then because I love her and I think she's great.
yeah, yeah. She also brings a tool you can't get anywhere else in the faction, with that white noise we discussed earlier. And it's very, very important for the Corregidor game plan that you have that white noise. So Jazz should be in every list. Uh, the second must buy are the Morans. So really, when you look at the faction, I don't think it's controversial to say that Corregidor is balanced around the Morans. And these are two units. They've got infiltration, so they start halfway up the field. They have a repeater on them, so they have an 8-inch hacking area around them. So already, just when you start the game, you've already got, 16-inch area on the midline of a hacking network, which is something most other factions can't do, and especially not at the price point. These guys are 16, 15, 16 points each. Like it's an incredible value proposition. And they also put down a crazy koala, which is a mine that will come and find your opponents if they get too close to it.
Can't beat that. Explosive,
Mm,
cute things. You gotta love it.
yeah, absolutely. They're very special because they're not most repeaters are robots or can be shut down by specific equipment or hacking. The Morans can't really be hacked, so for your opponent to get rid of that repeater, they have to kill them. And if you've put them on a rooftop somewhere, that can be really hard for your opponent to do.
Right. Yeah. So, would you say? I mean, we've kind of mentioned it a few times here, but obviously, hacking is a huge focus, a huge thing for
Mm,
Corregidor. I think it's probably what they're the most well known for, and then also this sort of different angles of attack. Ways to solve problems in kind of unusual or indirect routes. Would you say those are the two kind of defining characteristics of Corregidor?
yeah, absolutely. I think the hacking is a big deal, and your vectors of attack are a big deal. The way they do that, we discussed it kind of off the table troops, and there are some kind of others a bit later down the line you can take a look at in your Corregidor career. But they also do that in sort of the rock, paper, scissors style gameplay with the smoke and the white noise and the visors and the blah, 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 blah. But that's a bit more complicated.
Yeah. I just want to kind of give people a better sense, somebody that either maybe came from a non-hacking focused
Mm,
sectorial or is new to Infinity and isn't familiar with the mechanic. Because I think hacking is the thing that is both kind of intimidating for people that are new to the game, but is also like a another level of complexity. We've talked a lot here
mm.
about things like pitchers, things like repeaters. Can you just give a very broad overview of how the hacking works and how like setting up your network and the ways that gives you an advantage and particularly I guess how that deals with like um, if you have multiple hackers on the board, it extends your range out so that you're getting multiple responses if an opponent is in your hacking range and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we discussed, there are two kinds of hackers. You've got killer hackers and you've got the regular hackers. So regular hackers, they can freeze enemy heavy units. They can isolate enemy heavy units, which means they can't receive orders, which is essentially they can't receive activations, which can kind of stick them there. And the last thing they can do is spotlight someone, which means you can send either guided missiles at them or it just gives you a +3 to be shooting at them. But the nice thing about hacking is a lot of the time it's very incidental. So as you discussed, whenever your opponent makes a move in one of your networks, which you make by putting out the repeaters. So if your opponent walks someone into within 8 inches of a Moran, each one of your hackers gets a hacking attempt against someone. So a lot of the time, what you'll do is you'll take Jazz because we love Jazz. You'll take another regular hacker and another killer hacker, just for redundancy, and to really disincentivize your opponent from hacking you through your own network, because that's something that can happen. So what'll happen is your opponent will walk into within 8 of a repeater, and both of your hackers will get a hacking attempt at them. Now, your opponent can resist this, but if they're not a killer hacker, they can't do anything back to you. So it's a very low risk thing. If you've also got something like a gun watching them, you can put your opponent in a bad spot where if they move to shoot your gun, suddenly they're getting hacked as well. And Infinity's the defense of Infinity is about layering and setting up all these direct and indirect defenses. And hacking is a really big part of your indirect defense. And as I said before, it's very incidental. Even if your opponent's not heavy infantry or something like that, and they're walking through your deployment zone, you're just getting these nice little spotlights that are going to swing things more in your favor. But then there's very aggressive hacking as well that Corregidor can do, where turn one, your main game plan can be to get repeaters in your opponent's deployment zone, start freezing their heavy infantry, start gaining control of their tags, their mechs, and the main way you do that is through repeaters. So repeaters come in a few different ways. And what a repeater is it's just this thing has an 8-inch zone where your hackers get response if they're within.
Right. So by default, your hackers can only hack things that are within 8 inches of them. So yeah, again, if something walks into their 8 inch zone, then they can try to hack them. But if you have those repeaters out there, that counts as being in their hacking zone, which is the really key thing about the
Yeah.
incidentals that you're talking about.
And usually your hackers, with some notable exceptions, they're usually quite squishy.
Yeah.
They're not people who you want to bring into the midfield. You're bringing your office's IT guy, into a battlefield, and he's probably not going to adjust very well to that. Uh, so yeah, a lot of what you're doing is trying to set up. A lot of people call it colloquially your network,
Yeah.
which is your forward repeaters.
Mhm.
So the Morans are really important for that, because you've got these great methods like pitchers, which we touched on a little before, that Hellcat deployable repeater. But you need to take actions to do that. And if your opponent has the first turn, you don't get the opportunity to set that network up. So the Morans are a big problem solver in ensuring that in every game you play, you start with a network.
Mhm.
Uh, and if your opponent's playing something like the Japanese secessionist army and has a bunch of cybernetic samurai, having a Moran at a key approach can stop that whole approach. And they're a very useful unit in not losing in deployment, because even if you've kind of scuffed your deployment zone deployment a bit, Morans can just be such a stopgap and such a time waster
Yeah.
that it can mean your opponent can really struggle to get into you turn one. But then they've got more outside of that. They're very sneaky units. They've got stealth. So in their turn, they can sort of run up into your opponent's units as well and, be camping out somewhere for you to start hacking from.
Yeah, and that's the key thing about them compared to something like a repeater. A repeater can be broken.
Mm,
It's harder to get rid of the Moran because it's a unit that has normal abilities to defend and it has mimetism, so it's harder to hit. And you can put it up on a building and have it crouch, so it's very hard to see. And there's all sorts of ways
mm,
to make them be more of a problem. And one of the big things you want to do in this game is when your opponent is going, you want to waste their orders. You want to make them spend a lot of orders trying to do something and make it as hard as possible so that they have less opportunity to kill you basically or do their objectives.
yeah.
Yeah.
And, they've got all that, which is really great. But they've got a lot of gravy as well. As we mentioned before, they're specialists. And it's pretty common for a lot of Infinity missions to have objectives on the center line. So if you're going first, it's not uncommon to just have a Moran, one on each objective. They both interact with it, and you're starting off in a really strong position, objective wise. But then also they're genuinely pretty decent shooters. They're that ballistic skill 12 with mimetism -3. Uh, and like the combi. A lot of people like the boarding shotgun profile with the flashballs, which is really good, but does limit your range a bit. But if you're ever coming across a mission that has, an objective a little bit further back, where you might want to put the Moran a bit further back, or that has an exclusion zone, which is a thing some missions have that say you can't deploy as far up as you usually would. It's good to whip out that rifle, and they can genuinely get some really good work out of it.
Yeah, and all of this for, you know, 15 to 18 points, so it's yeah, it's pretty
Crazy.
spectacular. Yeah. Very cool. Last thing I want to touch on here, because I'm sure people would be disappointed if we didn't talk about it, but we have a plethora of giant stompy robots to choose from in this faction.
Mm,
Are any of them notable? Are there any of them things that folks should look at if they just want to get a big stompy robot on the table? Because I'm that guy.
absolutely. We're pretty blessed in Corregidor with having generally pretty good mechs. The one I'd really you've got kind of three tiers of mech, where you've got kind of your you've got the Gecko, who's maybe the cheapest mech, or definitely one of the cheapest mechs in the game.
Yeah,
Uh, he's pretty easy to slot into a list. He's very chunky. He's very cool. He's very fun. And can go into weirdly big fire teams, which is something special that the geckos can do. Next up, you've got the iguana, who's quite a good mech, but really I'd be looking to upgrade all the way to the gator, who's sort of your big daddy mech.
the big boy.
Uh, One thing you've got in Infinity is you have your points when you make a list, but you've also got your special weapons cost, or SWIC, is what a lot of people call that. And you have six of it when you build a list. And Corregidor as a hacking faction, it's very you're limited sometimes more by your SWIC than by your points.
Yeah.
And if you're taking both Morans and you're taking two hackers, you've already spent two out of your six SWIC. So really, you don't have a ton. You got to be very careful with. Now, the Gator, the reason I'd be taking the Gator over the Iguana is that essentially it's a unit you can put out on defense as well. It's got a weapon that if it hits, it's got an explosive round, which is really nice compared to the Iguana's just sort of normal armor piercing round. So having that double duty is really, really valuable in Corregidor. And then it's got a bunch of other, not frankly, nonsense on it as well. It's got tactical awareness and NCO, which doesn't need to mean anything to you. But what it means is it essentially it comes to the table and it gets three orders it can spend on itself. So even if you're wanting to do other things in your turn, you can get quite a lot done with three orders from a mech.
Yeah.
And that's a great little efficiency there. And then, yep, like it's got a fantastic gun. It's got a little a cute robot it can poop out who can go and do objectives. It's got like mine dispensers. It's a real like it's a marvel of tech in Infinity and in Corregidor. And yeah, I can heartily recommend it. There's when you get to more advanced play, there's a lot of pretty insane stunts setups you can do with the Gator. So yeah, love the guy.
Yeah, he's also got some close range defense with the chain rifle, which is something that a lot of
Mm,
the mechs, their weak spot is their huge gun platforms, and they're really good at shooting long distances. But if you get real close to them and try to hit them, they're really vulnerable. So that gives you a little
yeah,
extra, defensive ability up close.
and quite good in pretty good defensively in close combat as well. So another way is for someone to get a ninja into you. If you can drop a chain rifle on someone trying to get in close with a shotgun, but if someone tries, comes in and tries to chop you up, you're pretty good at fending that off as well. So it's in terms of a tag, it's also got a bit of inbuilt hacking defense, which is nice. So in terms of a new player wanting to put a mech on the table, it's one that can sort of take care of itself pretty easily
Yeah.
and has a bit of resistance to a lot of the common pitfalls and approaches that come putting a mech on the table.
Very, very cool. Well, I think that's about enough to get somebody started. So if you're looking to get into Corregidor, hopefully this gives you a good, idea of what's available, what's in the field, and a good way in. Obviously, the action pack is key. Go pick that up. It's
Mm.
got the name Corregidor right on the box, and that's a few ideas for where to go from there. Um, I like Corregidor because I think their lore is cool, and I really like the Team
Right.
Z novel that they did a couple years ago. That's what really got me going on Corregidor. Can you give me a sales pitch, an elevator pitch? Maybe I'll put this at the beginning of the video as like a stinger. Why should somebody play Corregidor? And you can go at that however you want, whether it's from the gameplay perspective or a fluff perspective or an aesthetic, whatever you like about them. Why should somebody play Corregidor?
You should play Corregidor if you're very interested in sort of like kind of a Red Mars Leviathan sort of approach to science fiction, where you've got this great expansion of humanity, but a real focus on who are the people doing the groundwork to lay that future. Who's on the dusty red planet before it gets terraformed? Who's out in the vacuum of space repairing space vessels? And then what happens sort of when they become independent and need to protect themselves? They've kind of got this, all of the units' backgrounds, they're tied into who were they before Corregidor as kind of a micronation got established. They're all specialist workers in the vacuum of space, with magnetic climbing boots and special oxygen gear, jumping from orbits, or in kind of special space rescue teams. And then what happens when they need to defend themselves? They've got a very cool lore as essentially kind of a workers' rights spec ops, in a sense.
Yep.
So units like the intruders, they're infiltrating job sites, where things have gone wrong, kind of as commandos, to either kind of get everyone there out, shoot the place up. It's really, really cool from that perspective. But then when you're sort of getting them on the table, you want to play Corregidor because you're never really going to have a game where you're not going to have an out. No matter what happens to you when you play Corregidor, you've usually got one or two things in the bag that can really turn things around. And that focus on heavy hacking is really interesting. They've got some of the best network projection in the game. So if you want to play in that hacking space, it's a great faction to jump in on as well.
Very well said. If I wasn't already sold on them, I would be by now for sure. Space, they're blue collar space soldiers, and they
Mm,
got big robots that are cool and little cute cats. So you kind of got a bolt from
yeah,
both ends.
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on. That was super duper helpful. Hopefully everybody watching found it helpful as well. What do you have going on over on your channel? Anything coming up that you're particularly excited about? I know you recently got to interview Gabriel about the novel. I caught that video. Very cool. Very good stuff. I was pleased to see that a lot of stuff in all the interviews that we all did, we touched on a lot of different stuff, which was cool. All those interviews
Yeah.
went very well. Anything coming up that you're particularly excited about?
I mean, we're just winding down on our coverage of Infinity's newest faction, Next Wave, who are another very interesting faction from the lore perspective. In Infinity, you have this sort of invading alien force, called the Evolved Intelligence and the Combined Army, and these are the first humans essentially to sort of succumb to that evolved intelligence. So a lot of interesting questions about humanity, the future of humanity, and some really great models, and rules there as well. So we're winding down on that. I've got a bit of a battle report coming up, this week. So if you're interested, and you're not sure where to start, maybe you're one of Jeff's regular Malifaux viewers, and Infinity sounds cool, but you don't really know what a game of Infinity looks like. Should have a video up soon of a battle report. You can kind of see the pace and flavor of Infinity. Otherwise, if you've sort of graduated in your Corregidor career a little bit, come to the channel and check out, the deep dive on the faction. I go through every unit in the list, can give you some example lists, ideas of when and why you'll use units. But no, I think this is a really great, tool and resource if you're just getting started. But yeah, no, thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much. So I'll leave some links so people can find all that stuff down below. Definitely go check out that recent video. Again, once you've got a game or two under your belt, go check out the recent video that Dante did with focusing on Corregidor and talking a little bit more high level, so you can kind of see where to go from the basics here. But this was great. Thanks so much for coming on. Huge thank you to the Extremely Cool Kids tier on Patreon, the Steam Powered Scoundrels, Robbie Ounce, Tom Likely, Russets, and Devin. And thanks for watching.